There are 9 distinct subtypes of fire spells in Elden Ring, with the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC adding one additional incantation school of its own. In this video, we will be analyzing and ranking the fire spell schools from least to most powerful. Let's take a look at the 5 ranking categories and quickly explain them. Each category will yield points on a scale of 1 to 10, with 2 categories being worth double points. Keep in mind that this ranking is just my personal opinion from spending roughly 1500 hours in the game. Damage output. This category will be worth double points, seeing as most of you here, myself included, care most about just how much bang for your FP buck you'll be getting. FP cost will not be considered here. It is part of a separate category. Utility. Any buffing spell that the spell school may provide will be considered, as well as unique traits that certain spells have which makes them additionally useful in combat. This includes spells with a semi-dodging animation or otherwise unique property. Range, tracking, and spread, RTS for future reference. This one is also worth double value. Range is probably worth a bit more than a single point on its own, as a spell can have amazing damage and no range to make use of it. A perfect example of this is Gelmir's Fury. Forgiving tracking and area coverage are deeply tied into range, and it's usually the case that a spell either relies on its tracking or area coverage, but not both. Casting cost and spell slots. Here, I have used a simple formula. The total FP cost of all spells added together is divided by their number. The total sum number of used slots added together is then also divided by their number. These two results are then multiplied, giving us the average cost of the entire spell school. The lower the cost, the higher the rank. An average cost of 15 to 20 is a perfect score of 10. An average cost of 20 to 25 is a 9, and so on, in increments of 5. Sources of damage boosting. A unique spell catalyst is worth 4 points. Plus, certain spell schools can benefit from power stancing the same seal or staff for a multiplicative damage increase, for which I will award an additional 2 points if necessary. Any unique boosting talisman is worth 2 points, for a maximum of 4, given by 2 different talismans. I will not be considering Flock's Canvas or Faithful Canvas or Fire Scorpion talismans. The reason is that these will equally buff all of the fire spells, so it would be pointless to include them. Finally, a unique weapon or armor piece that buffs the spell school will offer the final 2 points. For each category worth double points, I will be considering 2 spells per school. For each category worth normal, I will consider either 1 or 2 spells per school. In either case, it will be those that excel most in that given category. So why 2 spells, you may be asking? It's because every spell school has that one spell that melts more than all the others. The thing is, we're not considering individual spells here, but their corresponding schools. Okay, but why not 3 or 4 spells? Why not the average of all spells in all of the categories? This is because not every spell is meant to be a damage spell, or a kiting spell, or a utility spell. Furthermore, you likely won't be equipping every single spell from a given school to begin with. Taking 1 or 2 per category ensures that the results aren't muddled and paint a more realistic view of the spell school in question. The cost category is the only exception from these rules, as I will be considering all of the school's spells. Now, let's begin ranking the fire schools, shall we? Number 9. Fire Monk Incantations. There are also 3 schoolless fire spells, but they are considered separately, since they are not boosted by the school's corresponding seal, nor do they emit the Fire Monk sigil when cast. Damage, 6 out of 10. I have considered O-Flame and Whirl O-Flame. If I were only considering O-Flame, the overall score would be an 8. But since it is virtually the only viable spell in this school, I cannot award it any more points. Utility, 10 out of 10. Flame Grant Me Strength is the sole spell considered here, and it provides plus 20% physical and fire damage, plus some decent stamina regeneration. What more can you ask for? RTS, 3 out of 10. Considered spells are Whirl O Flame for range and O Flame for spread. Even though I tried to squeeze out the best possible score here, this is still easily the weakest area of the spell school. Cost, 9 out of 10. This is another saving grace of the spell school, though it won't mean much in the end. There are no multiple slot spells here, and the average cost is 21.4 FP. Boosting, 6 out of 10. The Giant Seal boosts these incantations, though it is ill-advised to power stance 2 of them, since the incant scaling is pretty low. O Flame does get boosted by the Godfrey icon, so I'll give another 2 points. As far as armor pieces or weapons, there are none. Average score, 6.14. This puts the Fire Monk incantations into the D tier. Number 8. Blood Flame incantations. Damage, 5 out of 10. Considered spells are Blood Flame Talons and Furious Blade of Ansbach. I think these incants were meant to be supplementary sources of bleed for casting heavy builds that don't have other methods of using bleed, and the modest stat requirements support this idea. Utility, 9 out of 10. Blood Flame Blade sits here as the sole securer of a near-perfect score. The only reason it doesn't get a 10 is because it does have the limitation of not working on 99% of somber weapons. Yet another reason why Bloodhound's Fang is the cancerous monstrosity we all know. RTS, 7 out of 10. Blood Boon and Swarm of Flies secure a solid placement here. Both of these have fairly solid traits. Blood Boon opens the possibility of inducing bleed in one or several targets at once, while allowing you to keep moving in any direction while casting. Swarm of Flies is a slow-moving, single target, well, swarm. It deals very low damage, but takes the pressure off the caster since it has excellent tracking and more than decent bleed buildup. Cost, 10 out of 10. The average cost of the spell school is the cheapest in the game, only 15.4 FP. No multi-slot spells to speak of. Boosting, 3 out of 10. The weakest link of this spell school comes by too few ways to make it more viable to build around. Furious Blade of Ansbach alone can be boosted with Godfrey Icon, and there is the unique benefit of potentially activating Lord of Blood's Exaltation and White Mask's effects. This isn't a direct boost to the damage of these spells, however, so I cannot value any of the mentioned boosts for more than a point each. Average score, 6.57. This puts the Blood Flame incantations into the C tier. Number 7. Miscellaneous incantations. These consist of 5 spells belonging to no particular school. While the Crucible incantations are technically Erdtree incantations, I have grouped these incants as such in a separate video. This is the only fire-based Erdtree and Crucible incantation, so I won't showcase a separate school, only to put a single spell in it. Damage, 9 out of 10. Catch Flame and Placidusax's Ruin carry hard. Both can hit for tremendous damage, albeit in entirely different ways. Utility, 6 out of 10. This unlikely band of incants offers an array of unique little benefits that don't always do much, but they always do something. Placidusax's Ruin does give you the ability to both repel assailants for a solid burst of lightning damage, or bear down on several enemies with fire beams while conveniently hovering in midair. Fire's Deadly Sin does also reset Frostbite and prevents undead from returning. RTS, 8 out of 10. Flamesling has your basic easy-to-cork projectile that can reach much further than you would otherwise be able to if you locked on. All spell schools have these fireball animations get an 8 in range. Aspect of the Crucible Breath offers good area coverage, and it is actually unprecedented at stun-locking small and medium-sized enemies while dealing very respectable damage. Cost, 6 out of 10. We have an average cost of 38.36 FP per cast, and one spell that asked for 3 slots. Boosting, 4 out of 10. Unsurprisingly, this collection of spells is quite difficult to boost since they have little in common with each other except that they deal fire damage. The Crucible set does boost the one corresponding spell, and there is also the matter of Placidus Axe's Ruin being strengthened by the Roar Medallion alongside it. Flame Sling does also get a boost from the Godfrey icon. Still, these boosts are fairly spell specific and do impose limitations on what kind of build you can go for. Thus, I value them slightly less than usual. Average score? 7.14. This puts the miscellaneous incantations into the B tier. Number 6. Mesmer Flame incantations. Damage? 7 out of 10. Mesmer's Orb and Rain of Fire can both deal fairly strong damage, but are plagued by some inconsistency. Personally, I wouldn't object if Mesmer's Orb dealt just a tad bit more damage, though it never exactly disappoints. Since the huge buff to Rain of Fire, both would get about a 7. Utility, 4 out of 10. While Mesmer's Orb does allow you to perform a semi-dodge on most melee attacks, consistently making use of it this way takes some skill, as an enemy that locks on when you're already hovering is more than likely to hit you out of the cast. Should you succeed, you will also knock any remaining enemies back in a deceptively large radius. RTS, 8 out of 10. Both Rain of Fire and Fire Serpent have some nice traits here. The range and coverage of Rain of Fire is very good, and Fire Serpent's tracking is well above average, making quick casting it another solid tactical option. Cost, 7 out of 10. The average cost per cast is 30.59 FP, with Mesmer's Orb requiring 2 spell slots. Boosting, 10 out of 10. This is one of the very few spell schools that literally has buffs coming out of its Mesmer fire grease filled ears. It's got it all. Its own seal, 2 separate armor pieces that further increase the damage, and they all get boosted by the Godfrey icon. Even though this is the only talisman, the Fire Knight seal is actually barely good enough to somewhat merit power stancing if you're going all faith, much like the God Slayer seal. Average score? 7.28. This puts the Mesmer Flame incantations into the B tier. And smoldering smack dab in the middle of our list are the Magma Sorceries, the only sorcery school capable of dealing an elemental type other than magic. Damage, 9 out of 10. When taking on larger enemies like Deathbirds, Ulcerating Tree Spirits, or other intimidating brutes, Rykard's Rancor will make them feel like a mildly unpleasant fever dream. The spell feels very unique to use and will rarely underperform. Roiling Magma is not the most consistent spell, and it has really bad range, but is surprisingly hard-hitting whenever it does function as intended. Utility, 2 out of 10. This is the lowest score I've given on a particular category. While Roiling Magma does offer an excellent pocket nuke option when trying to safely deal with several enemies at once without even engaging, it does perish when hitting any obstacle, and while it does deal solid damage if it connects with an enemy, it just kinda awkwardly disappears without even exploding. RTS, 9 out of 10. Magma Shot's range carries hard. Its traveling lifeline is longer than that of incantations, making it one of the best options available if you like free aiming. Even if you miss an enemy, the residual magma will deal considerable chip damage. As for area coverage, I would argue that Rykard's Rancor will be rarely outdone by any spell. Its only flaw is a relative dependence on RNG, since the explosions are fairly delayed. Cost? 8 out of 10. The average cost is 25.9 FP, with Rykard's Rancor alone requiring 2 spell slots. Boosting, 9 out of 10. With the Talismans of the Dread and Godfrey icon, this is one of the only spell schools in the game which gets boosted in its entirety by 2 completely separate talismans that aren't Vlog's Faithful or Scorpion. If Gelmir's staff were worth power stancing, this would be a 10, but I'm forced to give it a 9 since it also doesn't get any armor pieces or weapons that help. Average score? 7.85. This puts the Magma Sorceries into the A tier. Number 4. Dragon Communion Incantations. Now, before I get publicly crucified, let me preface this by saying I gave this school 10 points in damage and 9 in RTS, giving it 38 out of 40 points in the two most influential categories. It is very much in a similar realm of quality as the next two schools at least, and could have easily ended up higher. Damage, 10 out of 10. I don't really think this requires much explanation. Theodorix's Magma and Agil's Flame are probably the hardest melting contenders in this group. On full casts, you're almost guaranteed to see 5-digit damage numbers. Utility, 5 out of 10. Bale's Tyranny is an almost entirely fire-based spell that also gives significant hyper armor, allowing for trade-outs when absolutely necessary. Agil's Flame does allow you to hover in mid-air while casting, which offers occasional positional advantages. RTS, 9 out of 10. Dragonfire has very strong range, better than that of its named counterpart, which does have equally impressive spread. I kindly refused to look at the Magma incants, since they do feel like trying to hit something with a lava-filled water balloon. Cost, 3 out of 10. With an average cost of a whopping 51.5 FP, the Dragon Communion incants are easily the most expensive of all. There are also two of them needing 2 slots. Boosting, 10 out of 10. As if their unboosted damage wasn't impressive enough, the Dragon Communion incants can also be bolstered by a variety of sources. The weightless DC seal is widely regarded as the best in the game, and is very frequently power stanced to offer even greater power. The Roar Medallion also buffs every single Dragon Breath spell, while Talisman of the Dread does bolster Theodorix's Magma, Magma Breath, as well as Bale's Tyranny. But it's a new DLC tool, Rockheart, which kicks the Dragon Communion into overdrive. Average score, 8.0. This puts the Dragon Communion into the S tier. Number 3. Fire Giant Incantations. Damage, 10 out of 10. Burn Flame is possibly the strongest incant in the game, or at least in the top 3. Flame of the Fell God works as a wonderful initiation tool, and is easily one of the most overlooked and underrated incants in the game. Alongside Great Oracular Bubble, it is the only spell in the game which doesn't draw aggro when you cast it. It's effectively invisible to enemies, giving you an unprecedented advantage in setting up damage, often ending encounters before they even begin. What most people don't know is that you can actually chain cast it, though a considerable delay in input is necessary. Utility, 7 out of 10. On the surface, these incants seem simple, but they all have unique benefits that quickly become obvious. Burn Flame practically has a fully fledged dodge mechanic, and whatever shortcomings Roiling Magma possesses as a pocket nuke are completely erased with Flame of the Fell God. All of the explosion-based incants here also knock enemies back very reliably. RTS, 9 out of 10. Giant's Flame Take Thee is another corkable projectile, except it's on steroids. Whatever excellent range you could already get from it is amplified by its explosive hitbox, which is viable to catch enemies standing just a bit further away than you'd think. Burn Flame is near perfect in terms of area coverage, and none of its incant colleagues are far behind. Cost, 6 out of 10. Though admittedly pricey with an average cost of 39.75 FP and 2 dual slot spells, this school certainly pays for itself. Boosting, 6 out of 10. As stated, the Giant Seal is not the best, but having a seal at all is already good news. The Godfrey icon does boost all except Flame of the Fell God, but it will usually get the bonus damage from enemies not being aware of you, so no worries. Average score, 8.14. This puts the Fire Giant incantations into the S tier. Number 2. Black Flame Incantations. Damage, 8 out of 10. Here's the thing. The more HP your enemy has, the stronger the Black Flame sapping effect, which eats away 2.5% of an enemy's max HP every time it is applied. This means these incans can take down certain bosses as quickly as spells dealing 10 out of 10 damage. Against bosses with low HP, most spells here would get about a 6, which is why I give the school an 8, since it is an average between the two extremes. Utility, 9 out of 10. Black Flame's protection is essentially a defensive Howl of Shabriri. It increases your physical defense by 35%, but takes away from your Crimson Flask's healing potency by 20%. Not a bad trade-off at all. Black Flame Ritual is an excellent high damage smokescreen, which will also stagger certain enemies, giving you some much needed reprieve. RTS, 7 out of 10. Black Flame is your basic corkable projectile that I keep mentioning, except it also gains some small additional range if fully charged, as it gains a slightly larger hitbox. This isn't very noticeable, however. The spread on Scouring Black Flame is decent, and its hitbox is such that it can hit the same enemy twice, though it is somewhat difficult to free aim and just misses completely at times. Cost, 10 out of 10. Possibly the strongest attribute going for this school is that it's so darn affordable. It has the average cost of 19.14 FP, and not a single spell requires more than one slot. Boosting, 9 out of 10. I've already mentioned the Godslayer's seal being in a similar position to the Fire Knights in terms of power stancing, and the Godfrey icon does boost the majority of the incans here. The Godskin Noble's robe does boost Noble Presence by 20%, but I really wish it gave the boost to more of the spells, as it isn't worth the whole 2 points. Average score, 8.28. This puts the Black Flame incantations into the S tier. And finally, at number 1, we have the Frenzied Flame incantations. Damage, 10 out of 10. Unendurable Frenzy feels almost unfair. It's like a win button. And even when looking at its younger brother, Flame of Frenzy, you have to wonder how in the world does an early game incantation requiring 16 faith deal superior damage to most DLC Remembrance boss spells. Utility, 6 out of 10. Howl of Shabriri may be the strongest spell damage boost in the game, but it also comes at a hefty price of 30% extra damage received. As for any other utility, this school is devoid of it. RTS, 10 out of 10. Hello, this is Frenzied Burst. It can cross-map motherfuckers while traveling at the speed of sound. Did I mention it has perfect tracking? Since I do need to consider 2 spells, I'll simply take the spread on Unendurable Frenzy, since it is absolutely top tier. It can also be aimed straight in front of the caster for more focused damage. Cost, 7 out of 10. The average cost of the spell school is 26.63 FP, with only Midra's Flame of Frenzy requiring 2 slots. Good lord, what a huge disappointment that spell is.
And after such a quality boss.
Boosting, 10 out of 10. What do I even say here? The Frenzied Seal is weightless and has 400 incans scaling at max level, though is admittedly underwhelming for most people at meta levels. Regardless, the Godfrey icon boosts almost all spells here, and Aged One's Exaltation does net an extra point. The Maddening Hand and Black Dumpling Helmet just take things over the edge. Average score, 9.0. This puts the Frenzied Flame incantations into the S+ tier, the illustrious S+ tier. Oh my god, oh, the crazy, absolutely insane Frenzied Flame, oh my god. Thanks for watching, you know. For my next video I will be looking at all the physical damage spells and ranking them as well. I am really looking forward to it. Like, comment, subscribe if you care, and be well.